This video is sponsored by me and you. Find out more at the end. Hello everyone, my name is Apostate. I make YouTube videos and I host live streams where I discuss the religion of Islam in all sorts of different ways. Despite having left the religion, I still have an interest in discussing it because of the effect that it has on so many people around the world, including those who have left the religion, like myself. Today I want to briefly talk about what it means to be an ex-Muslim, because I realized that to many people that is a foreign concept. I was catching up with a Muslim friend the other day and he asked me what I'm up to these days. I explained to him briefly what I do on this channel, and when he asked me how he could find the channel, I told him to search for keywords he might think are relevant. And I don't recall exactly what words came to his mind, perhaps a word like resistance or something similar, but when I said ex-Muslim, he stared at me blankly. I don't blame him. I myself hadn't heard of that term till I was years into contemplating my doubts about the religion. So I hope that this video informs people about what ex-Muslim means. I asked members of my community what they think it means. I posted the questions on our Discord server, Patreon, and here on YouTube, and I'll read you some of the answers and give you my thoughts on them. Here's one answer. To me, an ex-Muslim is someone who is either born in a Muslim family, who believed in Islam, or someone who converted to Islam, but after some time, they stopped believing due to various reasons. For example, they might have done some research which made them realize that the religion isn't true. People say that ex-Muslims were never real Muslim to begin with, which is not true. Many ex-Muslims were once faithful. We were Muslims, but we no longer fall into that category, therefore we label ourselves as ex-Muslim. I think an ex-Muslim is someone who was related to Islam, either born or convert, and started questioning their faith to the point they couldn't justify it anymore. The breaking point has a different threshold for each individual. Some are really high, but some are really low. And I really like this answer. Maybe the real ex-Muslim was the friends we made along the way. This is also another funny answer. Someone that Allah decides should leave Islam because Allah wills all. Technically, that's true. Anyone who has experienced the religion, i.e. been born into it, even if they weren't very deeply religious, but still experienced Islamic traditions, being followed and incorporated into their household or lives, or anyone who once believed in Islam for any given amount of time, and later came out of it willingly. An ex-Muslim is someone who used to accept Muhammad as a prophet from God, but does not anymore. An ex-Muslim is quite simply any person who previously self-identified as Muslim, but currently does not. A person who understands the Quran and Hadith. In a similar vein, a person who read the Quran and Hadith. And I think these comments are referring to the idea that if you truly read and understand the Quran and Hadith, you have no choice but to leave Islam. I don't necessarily think that is true, but I think it increases your chances of having doubts and possibly leaving the religion. And then there are some self-indulgent answers like an ex-Muslim is a courageous, honest, and intelligent individual, or an intellectually honest Muslim once upon a time, or a progressive mind respecting humanity and nature, someone who values truth and reason over complacency. But I think the simplest definition is an ex-Muslim is someone who used to be a Muslim and is not anymore. And I hope that the variety in the tone of the answers demonstrates that we're not all the same, and we don't even think of the meaning of ex-Muslim the same way. And I have some thoughts of my own that I would like to share with you. Not everyone who was born into Islam and doesn't practice it considers themselves an ex-Muslim. There are many non-practicing Muslims who have never heard of this label, and if they did, some might identify with it and adopt it, but some might find the label cultural Muslim or kind of Muslim to be sufficient for them. And I think it largely depends on the magnitude of the impact that religion has on their lives. Sometimes this label is helpful as a summarized response to believers who ask us why we aren't adhering to their religion. It's not uncommon for followers of Islam to presume that we share their beliefs, and therefore it's not uncommon for them to react negatively when we don't behave like a Muslim should. So it can be helpful to simply say, I'm ex-Muslim, rather than saying I'm not Muslim. Then they would ask, what do you mean? But your name is Muhammad or something, and then having to explain to them that we left the religion. Sometimes this label is helpful in separating us from Islamic beliefs. I don't believe much of what Muslims believe, so I don't want my ideas about life and the afterlife to be presumed based on my name or racial background or religion of birth, which is a good rule of thumb for anyone. But since a lot of Muslims like to be very loud and proud about what they believe, sometimes we feel the need to identify as different than that. But usually we don't want to be separated for the sake of being separated. We want to be allowed to live normally, preferably among the Muslims we grew up with. This label comes out of necessity. It helps us find representation when the only one we're usually afforded is a caricature of a terrible person. More often than not, if you hear of anyone leaving Islam, Muslims claim that they left because they're morally bankrupt, or because they're lost, or because they love to sin, and so on. In reality, there's plenty of fair representation of who we are and what we're like, but it's not as easy to find as what believers claim about us. So it's one of the main reasons why I do what I do, is to give you an example of an ex-Muslim. And I've spoken to so many of us, so many of them ex-Muslims, on my live streams. And as you can see, we're as diverse as Muslims themselves, which makes sense because we used to be them. Some might ask, why not just call yourselves atheists? Well, for one, not all of us are atheists. Sure, some don't believe in God at all, but some believe in some idea of God. They just don't think Islam got it right. And some are indifferent to the question altogether. I don't use the label atheist because atheism, the lack of a belief in God, isn't my main topic of discussion. It's the freedom to leave religion and the freedom to criticize it for the negative effects it has on many of us and its adherents. Through fair representation, the label ex-Muslim helps us fight the ostracization that results from the hatred that is deeply ingrained into a lot of believers' minds. Many are taught to hate us because they're told that we're examples of the worst of people. After all, what's worse than a person who knows the truth, then rejects it to follow Satan, the epitome of evil? Of course, the reality is nothing like that. But it can be hard for a lot of religious people to break free from the shackles of indoctrination if they're not presented with new information that challenges their position. And rather than vilifying Muslims, I hope to offer them a window into our minds, and also a chance at fair representation for themselves. It's why I platform so many Muslim callers on my live streams and give them a chance at an honest discussion about what they believe. One more reason I hope to see the term ex-Muslim popularized is to facilitate finding help and community for those among us who need it. There are countless people out there who feel confused and alone, and they might even believe that there's something wrong with them for not conforming in their beliefs, or always being the odd one out. I shudder when I think of how many people denied their own thoughts and lived and died in misery because nobody told them it's okay to doubt your religion. It's okay to leave it even. It's okay to be ex-Muslim. I can't even count how many times I've heard Muslims boast about how there are 1 point whatever or 2 point whatever billion Muslims on earth. And that's the kind of number that scares many of them on an individual level. A doubting Muslim might think, how could I be right and a billion people are wrong? But the reality is these millions and billions disagree among each other on every detail of the religion. And not only do most of them not understand the religion beyond the surface level, but a sizable portion of them aren't even believers. I myself still have Muslim on my national ID, and I'm counted as one. It's not practical or wise for me to walk into a government office in a Muslim country and ask them to change my religion field to none. You're presumed to be Muslim at birth, and that's what you'll always be until you die. Through this label, we can find each other, and I hope to see the day where we don't have to have religion fields on our government IDs, and we can live free of these restrictive labels. So if you're a Muslim, but you're not quite practicing or not quite believing, you might be asking yourself, should I call myself an ex-Muslim? And I'd say that depends on whether or not you want or need to. In my day-to-day life, the label doesn't come up that often for me. I don't have it in my personal social media bio, nor do I rush to mention it every time I meet someone. And that's because I'm lucky enough to live somewhere where religion isn't enforced on me. And I tend to keep my interactions with religious Muslims minimal to avoid the friction that comes when their expectations about my religiosity are shattered. But not everyone has that luxury. Contrary to what many Muslims believe, we don't obsess over this label and form an identity around it. It's quite the opposite. I find that those who are pressured or opposed for not behaving Muslim enough or for not having a Muslim enough identity, those people feel the need to seek haven in this label. And those who are left to live their lives freely either lose the title or never use it to begin with, such as cultural Muslims who manage to skirt the religious restrictions and live their life somewhat freely. To put it simply, an ex-Muslim is someone who used to be Muslim and isn't anymore. Whether you identify with that label or not, at least now you know what it means, and why I think it can be necessary. If you wish to help me on my mission, consider liking, subscribing, and possibly donating. Since the topics I cover are pretty controversial and risky, it's difficult to get sponsorships for the channel, so I rely heavily on your support. I'm making it my mission to help those who need it, so please consider aiding me in accomplishing that mission. And if you'd like to be a member of our community on Discord, just become a patron or YouTube member and link your Discord account. Instructions will be in the description below, like many of these lovely folks have done. Thank you all for your continued support. I could not do this without you. And as always, think critically and think for yourself. And consider watching one of these videos next.